We did a good job styling the contact page in the last video, but you may have noticed that we have one of our SVG icons that isn't the right color. Now, instead of duplicating the file and having one email adornment white and one email adornment green, we can actually use a really cool tool and trick to make it so that we can just have one file for the email adornment and then pass it whatever color we would like it to be. To see how we're going to do this, let's head on over to the browser. So here I am in the browser, and we see that we've got our one email icon here that's the wrong color. So let's open up a new tab and go to SVG2, the number 2, JSX.com. SVG2JSX.com. All right. And one of the things that I probably should have mentioned before, but what's really important is using SVGs for all your icons as much as you can, because SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. All right. So if you just take a regular PNG or JPEG image and you scale it up super large, it's going to start distorting and it's going to get blurry and it's going to look pixelated because it wasn't meant to be at that large size. However, SVGs are different because they're not made up of pixels like regular images, they're made up of vectors. And because they're made up of vectors, you can actually scale them. That's why they're a scalable vector graphic. You can scale them to any size and it will maintain clarity and proportions. This is really powerful. And so by using SVGs for all of your icons, that makes it so that you can resize them and reuse them all over the place without having to have different files or worrying about distortion. The file size for SVGs also tends to be really small, so that's why you will see that throughout the course for our icons. So here on svg2jsx.com, this does something really cool. If we go ahead and upload our SVG file, so we can go ahead and select our email adornment, go ahead and open that up. What this does is it takes the SVG code and turns it into a React component. This is really sweet and really helpful. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this code. Flip back on over to our code editor, and inside the images folder, let's go ahead and create a new file that we'll call email adornment. Actually, let's go ahead and capitalize the E and the A, .js, email adornment.js. And then go ahead and paste in the code from SVG to JSX. So now this is going to return the SVG directly for us to use within our code, but as a React component, which importantly means that we can pass it props. Okay, from the props, we're going to pass it a color prop. So let's go ahead and destructure this out, and we'll destructure out the color prop that will pass it. Now, everywhere where it's setting a stroke of the certain color, so here you can see this is our green color, this is just a clear background, so we can actually wrap this clear color in a JavaScript call and check the color that we pass it, or we can just have it default to the regular green color it was before if we don't set a color on it. All right, so let's go ahead and save that, and then we can come over to contact.js, go up to the top, and now instead of importing our email SVG icon directly, let's import email adornment, or we could just call it email here with the capital E since it's a component, from up a directory images/email adornment.js. Then we can go ahead and in place of our image with the email source, so we could not just pass email here. Okay, because you can't use a React component as the source for an image tag. This would not work. So what we can do instead is replace the image tag entirely with the email component that we now have, which itself returns the SVG. And then we can give it, actually, let's just do this. Let's go ahead and save that and flip back on over to the browser. You can see we'll have something to address here because it's not the right size, but we still now have our email icon showing up. So let's go ahead and now let's give it the color prop and pass it a color that we want. So we could even pass it a #000 for black. If we save it, check that out. We now have a black email icon. Or we can go ahead and pass it FFF and save. And now we have the white color that we desired. So that's a really cool and helpful way that you can make your code more reusable and customizable with your icons. All right, but it's not the right size anymore. And we couldn't just pass on the class of the, let's see, we used contact email, or let's see, what was it called? Contact email icon. We couldn't just pass that class onto our React component because that's not how this is set up. So what I propose instead is we need to put that class on the component wrapping our customized SVG component. Okay, you're going to need to make sure whenever you're using this, if you're using a SVG icon component, that you need to set a height on your parent container, on the container wrapping the SVG icon component. Okay, so we'll give this classes root classes dot contact email icon. So the same class we were using before that sets our height and our width. So let's go ahead and save that. If we flip on over, well, look at that. So I wanted to show you this because it's not going to work as expected yet. You can see that we do have some space here. And if we go ahead and inspect that space, it looks like our style is actually being applied. However, the SVG is not scaling automatically. Well, what's up with that? I thought I just said that this is a scalable vector graphic and it should be able to scale as much as it needs, right? Well, for that to happen, we have to change something slightly. Okay, so if we go over into our email adornment.js, we see on the SVG tag, we're passing it a width and a height here of a fixed size of 17 pixels height and 22 pixels width. Now we need to change this so that instead of passing in the fixed height and width, it's actually going to be a resizable value based on that height and width. So what we need to add, and this is a trick that you'll want to remember for whenever you're creating your own SVG icon components, is we need to add the viewBox prop, viewBox with a capital B. All right, and this essentially defines a proportional size that the SVG should render itself based on without explicitly defining what the height and width should be. It just defines what the proportions should be. All right, so we'll set this equal to, first, this takes 4 different parameters. The first one is the offset top and bottom that you want to set. So if you want to move it around within the box from top to bottom, you use the first number, but we're not going to do that. We want it to be centered, so we'll do 0. The second number is going to be an offset from left to right, and we'll again use 0. But then the third and fourth parameters are going to be the proportional height and width that you want it to be based on. So the trick to remember is just take your height and width from here and put it into the view box. So first would be the width of 22 and the height of 17. So now we can remove the height and the width properties and we just leave the view box defined here. And now that is going to tell the SVG to proportionally base itself on the width and height that it previously had. All right, so, and then remember, when you do this, you need to make sure that the parent container of the SVG has a height set. So let's go ahead and I'll actually save this and then go back to contact.js and let's remove the class with the height and width and go ahead and save that. So we just have the email component. If we flip back on over to the browser, you see that nothing shows up. And that's because without a height defined on the parent, it's not going to be able to resize the SVG proportionally. Okay, So if we go ahead and replace that with the contact email icon class on the grid item wrapping our SVG icon component, then that'll go ahead and apply the height and the width that we had previously. So if we go ahead and save that, you now see that the SVG appears and properly scales based on the dimensions of its parent. So that's pretty awesome. That's a really helpful, really nice, reusable tip that you should remember as you work on your own projects. Let's go ahead and tidy this up though and finish our styling. So if we go ahead and inspect the element here, we can see that this is our grid item and our grid item container that is holding all of our other containers, the rows for the contact info. All right, so to get it spaced out and looking like it does in the design file, let's first go ahead and set a height onto this container, and then we'll use that with a defined height so that it has extra space. Instead of just taking up the space of the content, we'll give it a height that is larger than that, and that'll give us extra space so that we can space these out. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll find the container direction of column that is wrapping all of our different rows here. Let's give this classes root of info container, and then we can come up, create our info container class, and let's give it a height of 15 rem. So we can go ahead and save that, and we'll see, oh, looks like we made a typo. This needs to be classes.info container. It's my fault. And now, so we can see if we go ahead and inspect this, that now we've got that extra space inside of our container here. And so we'll be able to distribute that extra space in between them and get them spaced out how we'd like. So that should already be an indicator of how we'll do this, getting that extra space between them. So we'll use the space between, and since we're wanting to do this in the vertical direction, and this is a container direction of column, we can go ahead and use the justify proper. And we'll set it to a justify of space between. So if we save that, that space is going to be distributed, and now we have these nicely spaced out between one another. Let's go ahead and keep working on this. So we'll space out the icon from the text now, but I want to do this in a kind of particular way because from the design file, we want more space on the left-hand side of the divider that's going to go between these. So more space on the side of the icon and a little less space on the side of the text. All right, so we'll go ahead and we will use, let's see, we've already got class for the icons, contact icon and contact email icon classes. So let's go ahead and give those a margin right of 2 rem, a margin right of 2 rem. And if we save that, that's going to go ahead and push our icons over, giving us nice spacing in between there. But then let's get a little bit of spacing on the side of our text. So we'll go ahead, and that is the class contact info here, setting the font size. Let's also give it a margin left of 1 rem. So if we go ahead and save that, that'll go ahead and push those out a little bit farther. So now we just need to go ahead and add the borders that's going to create our nice gridded up look for this. So a clean way that we can go ahead and do this, let's use this middle section here as sort of our baseline. We'll go ahead and use this to add a border top and a border bottom, which will get us both of the borders that we need. So let's go ahead and use this middle section here with the phone. We're going to give the grid item container wrapping that whole section the classes of root, and we can give this the classes dot, let's call it middle info. All right, just to be explicit. So we'll come up, create our middle info class, and we'll give it a border top of 2 pixels, a solid border, and the color white, and a border bottom of 2 pixels solid and color white. All right, so let's go ahead and save that, flip on over. And it looks like we've got some borders showing up. All right, but that's not exactly spaced how we would want. I think we want some more spacing in there to make this look a little more even. So let's go ahead and give this a padding. So this will put space inside that middle container. And let's use the shorthand for 1 rem on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. So let's go ahead and save that, flip on over, and I think that looks pretty nice. Let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back in the next video and set up the rest of our borders.